Hi, we're out on our range today, and recently I did a presentation evaluating the Ruger LC carbine in caliber 5.7 by 28. Now that generated a lot of questions, many of which fell into one of two categories. One, how does the Ruger LC carbine stack up against 9mm PCCs? And two, regardless of model, how does 5.7 by 28 when fired from a 16-inch barreled carbine stack up against 22 Winchester Magnum rimfire when it's fired from a 16-inch barreled carbine? Now, side note, we've already done a presentation comparing the Keltec CMR30 in caliber 22 Magnum to the FN57 in caliber 5.7 by 28. So if you want to see how the two cartridges compare in handguns, you can watch that. But today we're going to multitask. We'll see how the two calibers compare in 16-inch barreled carbines, and we'll also do an evaluation of the Keltec CMR30. And we'll do that evaluation in the guise of how does the CMR30 stack up against the LC carbine. And we'll start with comparing the two cartridges. And that will start with showing you a close-up what the two cartridges look like. And from your left to right are 9x19, 22 Winchester Magnum rimfire, 5.7 by 28, and 45 ACP. Now, if you look at the two in the middle, on the 5.7, the projectile looks quite a bit bigger, but these are both 40 grain projectiles. Now, in talking about the ammunition, a couple of things to add. First, 5.7 by 28. In the interest of brevity for the rest of today's presentation, I'll probably just call it 5.7. 22 Winchester Magnum rimfire. In the interest of brevity, I'll probably just call it 22 Magnum. Secondly, although different projectile weights are available for both calibers, in my experience, 40 grain is what's most common for both, so that's what we'll be using today. Okay, now let's go to the chronograph. I have the chronograph set up at 7 yards, and I have the LC carbine loaded with Federal American Eagle 5.7 by 28, 40 grain full metal jacket spear point. .2020. .2038. 2018. 2049. 2020. And 2066. Now let's try another type of ammo. And now let's try our FN 5.7 by 28 with its 40 grain VMAX projectile. .2096. .2071. .2096. .2141. .2095. And 2100. Now let's see how those stack up against 22 Magnum. So I've got the CMR loaded with Arms Core 22 Magnum 40 grain semi-jacketed hollow point. .1864. .1835. .1858. .1830. .1866. And 1918. Let's see how that compares to other types of 22 Magnum ammo. Now let's try CCI Maxi-Mag 22 Magnum 40 grain jacketed hollow point. $16.96. 1756. 1687. 1731. 1649. 1743. Let's try one more type of 22 Magnum ammo. And now we have Remington 22 Magnum 40 grain pointed soft point. $17.60. $17.78. $17.26. $17.89. $17.45. $17.22. $17.08. And $17.66. Now let's go crunch the numbers. Well, I crunched the numbers, and here they are. And of course, it comes with the normal caveats that chronographs don't always agree with each other, and certain environmental factors like ambient temperature and elevation can affect chronograph results. I also have to mention that in a lot of the demonstrations I do, I use this FN ammunition with its 40 grain VMAX projectile. And I do so because it is by far the most common ammunition I find at my local stores, and it seems to be pretty good ammunition. In fact, just a few minutes ago, this FN ammunition fired from the LC carbine proved itself to be very effective on medium-sized game. But anytime I use this FN ammunition, I always get a lot of feedback from people who tell me various different versions of this is the wrong ammunition and I should have demonstrated the sub-4 tallywhacker ammo that's banned on the commercial market. Okay, two things. One, if it's banned on the commercial market, I wouldn't be able to get it. And two, if it's banned on the commercial market, it wouldn't do anybody any good for me to demonstrate it to you. Okay, but that having been said, the results I got were, with the Federal American Eagle ammunition, a mean velocity of 2035. With the FN ammunition, a mean velocity of 2099. Now, how does that compare to 22 Magnum? With our Arms Corps 22 Magnum, we got a mean velocity of 1861. Compared to the CCI's 1710 and the Remington's 1749. That gives me 151 feet per second more than the CCI and 112 feet per second more than the Remington. By 22 Magnum ammunition standards, that's pretty impressive. Enough so that off camera, I fired another string of the Arms Corps ammo and confirmed these results. But even though that's impressive results for 22 Magnum, it's still 238 feet per second less than our FN ammunition. Making 5.7 by 28, I'm going to say, significantly more powerful than 22 Magnum when fired from a 16-inch barreled carbine. However, as I've said so many times, these are just numbers on a piece of paper. How will this translate into effectiveness on the intended target? Let's see if we can put that to the test. So to test the effectiveness of our ammunition, we're going to use the meat target. And for those who haven't seen it before, the meat target is leather couch skin, followed by pork steak pectoral, pork ribs, a bag of oranges to simulate lung tissue, more pork ribs on the back, 4 layers of t-shirt on the front, 4 layers on the back, and the whole thing followed by the new and improved high-tech fleece bullet stop. And I'm going to shoot this from a distance of 40 yards with our CMR30, which I have loaded with both the Arms Corps hollow points and the Remington pointed soft points. Let's see what kind of results I get. Well, I've taken the meat target apart, and we see what looks like some pretty good damage to the ribs on the front of the target. We also see what looks like pretty good damage to our orange lung tissue, and again, pretty good damage to the ribs on the back of the target. Now, as far as penetration, I was only able to recover 2 of the hollow point projectiles, and they were both stopped by the t-shirt on the back of the target. The rest of them may have gone into the fleece bullet stop. I've taken it apart, sifted through it, put it back together, and I just can't find them. However, I was able to recover all of our Remington soft point projectiles, and they penetrated anywhere from the 5th to the 35th layer of fleece. Now let's take a close-up look at these projectiles now. Here's the 2 hollow points I recovered. One looks like it has fairly good expansion and lost its jacket. The other has very good expansion, as opposed to the Remington soft points that I found that have anywhere from very poor to no expansion whatsoever. Now I have a new meat target set up, and I'll shoot this from 40 yards with the LC carbine, which is loaded with the FN ammunition, 5.7 by 28 with its 40 grain VMAX projectile, like a ballistic tip. And let's see what kind of damage I can do with this. Well, I've got the meat target taken apart, and we see what looks like pretty good damage to the ribs on the front of the target. We see a lot of damage to our orange lung tissue. Not as much damage to the ribs on the back of the target. And that has a lot to do with the fact the bullets had really fragmented by the time they got here. There's little tiny fragments of bullet all through our orange lung tissue. The bullets lost their jackets. Some of the jackets were stopped by the ribs on the back of the target. So there wasn't a lot penetrating here. Now, some of the pieces of projectile were stopped by the t-shirt on the back of the target, and one piece managed to make it through to the 12th layer of fleece. But I didn't recover anything that I could call a whole projectile. Let me show you what I did recover. And here's what I recovered. Lots of fragments of jacket, fragments of bullet. Here's one bullet that retained its jacket and mushroomed very well. Here's one that lost its jacket but still mushroomed out very well. And so we see that although this can be very effective on medium-sized game, perhaps not effective where a lot of penetration is needed. Okay, now that we've compared the ammunition, let's do something that actually compares the 2 firearms in question. I have this target set up, and I will shoot it offhand from a distance of 50 yards with the LC carbine. Let's see what kind of group I can get. And here's our group. And this one out here, I don't know if that's just me or not. Now I have the shot holes covered with the black pasty so they're easier to see. And remember, I shoot offhand because I don't just want to compare the accuracy of the firearms. I want to compare the accuracy that can be achieved with those firearms by the average shooter. So now I'll shoot this target from 50 yards with the Keltec CMR30, which I have loaded with the Arms Corps ammunition. And let's see how the groups compare. So the shots I fired with the LC carbine are covered with the black pasties. The shots I fired with the CMR30 covered with the red pasties. And we see with one rifle I have a tendency to pull to the right, the other rifle a tendency to pull to the left. But other than that, there isn't enough difference in the size of these two groups to talk about. Now I have two new targets set up, and let's try something else. Now I'm going to do some two-shot drills. Starting in the low ready with the safety on, I'll disengage the safety as I bring the rifle up, and then I'll fire 2 shots as fast as I think I can hit. And I'll do that drill a few times, shooting the target on your left with the LC carbine. Then I'll repeat the drill shooting the target on your right with the CMR30, and again, we'll see how the groups compare. And one more. Now let's try that with the CMR30. And now let's try that drill with the CMR30. Let's try one more. Well, one thing I can tell you is that the way the safety on this firearm is made, it's far more difficult for me to disengage the safety and re-engage the safety with this than it was the LC carbine. I can do it, but it really requires some concentration. But let's take a look at the targets. And here's the hits with the LC carbine. And except for the group being off to the right, which is a tendency that I have with that rifle, the group is not bad. And here's our hits with the CMR30. I fired more shots, so there's more hits, and the group is more centered. But as far as the size of the group, pretty close. And please keep in mind that these are half-size silhouettes, so those groups aren't as big as you might think. Okay, we've compared the power and effectiveness of the ammunition. We've compared the accuracy of these two firearms, or at least the accuracy I could achieve with them. Now it's time for the discussion of some of the features specific to the CMR and how they compare to the LC carbine. Fair warning, this is the boring part of the video where I talk. Also, we're fighting a rapidly setting sun, and so I'm disinclined to re-film this a dozen times before I finally get it right. So please bear with me if I accidentally call the CMR a PMR, and if I transpose words and syllables. I appreciate your patience. Now, one other thing is, as I'm doing the demonstration I'm about to do, there's going to come a point where I point a firearm at the camera. It's an unmanned camera. I am hundreds or thousands of miles away from you, and you're not seeing this in real time. So, if that freaks you out, then please turn this presentation off now. Okay, for those who are still here, in comparing the power of the ammunition, we saw that 5.7 is definitely significantly more powerful than .22 Magnum. We saw that on our meat target with the VMAX projectiles, the 5.7 appeared to do significantly more damage, but those projectiles fragmented, and it caused them to penetrate less than some of our .22 Magnum projectiles did. So depending on what it is you're trying to do, the 5.7 might not be the better choice. However, in my perception of the intended purpose of these two firearms, I'm going to say that 5.7 is definitely the clear winner over .22 Magnum. But I mean that specifically ballistically. .22 Magnum can have the advantage over 5.7 in that, looking at the prices recently at some of my local stores, .22 Magnum can be 50%, 60% or more less expensive than 5.7, and that is a real advantage. Not only that, when you buy the CMR, it comes with two 30-shot magazines, as where the LC carbine comes with one 20-shot magazine. You can see the difference in price there. And again, I don't like to talk about the specifics of price, but as near as I can tell, the CMR is going to be significantly less expensive, most of the time, than the LC carbine. Now, while we're talking about 30-shot magazines versus 20-shot magazines, obviously that's going to let you get more rounds downrange. But if you had to shoot a lot, and you got to the point where you're in the field having to reload magazines, when I load this 20-shot magazine for the LC carbine, the rounds just go in the top, just like an AR or an AK magazine. With the CMR magazines, you can put the rounds in the top, but you've got to make sure that you get the rim in the right place. And a lot of times people will load a magazine like this down and back like your typical handgun magazine. And these magazines can be so slow and difficult to load that if I got into a situation where I had to reload magazines, I still think I could get more rounds out of the LC carbine just because I can reload the magazines so much quicker. Not only are they slow to reload, but they're extremely difficult. This is a 30-shot magazine, and I cannot get 30 rounds in it. I like to think of myself as relatively physically capable, but this is the most difficult magazine to load I have ever encountered. Of every rifle magazine I have ever loaded, M1 carbine, M14, AR, AK, the list goes on. Any handgun magazine I've ever loaded, 1911, M9, M17, various types of Glocks, my Steyr GB, the list goes on at Astra. I have never encountered a magazine that I just couldn't load until now. The guys at Garner's hooked me up with this, what I call a granny device, that you stick on your magazine, and it allows you to just drop your round in there, push that down, push it back up. Drop your round in there, push that down, push it back up. Wow, that's handy. But imagine my embarrassment at needing a granny device to load a magazine, but I really do for this firearm. And that creates added expense, and if you're in the field and you lose this, you might be really out of luck. I am not at all happy with the way these 30-shot magazines load and the difficulty of it. Now, talking about the features of the firearm, when I put this firearm in my shoulder, it is not nearly as comfortable, does not feel as natural as the LC carbine does. However, we saw that I could shoot it just about as well. So, what feels right for me doesn't necessarily turn into score on the paper target. Also, the LC carbine we see has a folding stock. Press the button and it folds to get it out of the way, locks back in place. And then you can adjust that to a couple of different lengths to accommodate different size shooters. The CMR has a telescoping stock. Goes all the way in. Obviously you're not going to put that in your shoulder, you'd have to shoot that in some kind of assault position. You can take it all the way out, and then it can adjust to a couple of different lengths before it goes all the way back in, to adjust for different size shooters, or to adjust to whatever LBV or cold weather clothing you might be wearing that day. This system is really practical, and you activate it by pulling this lever down. I like this system a lot. Earlier I discussed the difficulty of the safety. Let me show you what this safety looks like. The safety's right here. You push it down. It's ambidextrous. I find though that when I push the safety down, sometimes my thumb gets in the wrong place and I'm trying to push the magazine release. Oh wait, no, I needed the safety. That to me is very unnatural, and I can overcome it, but it's going to require a lot of work. Now, another feature of this firearm is the ambidextrous charging handle. Now that's pretty handy. Once you put a round in the chamber and you start firing and your bolt is moving back and forth, this charging handle does not. Very similar to the way that AR platform rifles, you charge them and then that charging handle doesn't move. However, this does not have any kind of forward assist. So if you put a round in and it doesn't quite go, this you can't really push on to get it to go forward. Lacking a forward assist is something I consider a negative. Now, at this point, a lot of people will tell me that that's because I'm old and outdated and outlived my usefulness, and you may have a point there, but I really think the forward assist is a good feature, and I don't like the fact that neither of these firearms has something that works as a forward assist. Now, another feature this firearm has is the threaded end of the barrel and this cap over it to keep your threads clean. You can take that off and put on your suppressor or whatever. Actually, both of these firearms have one of these. Also, this firearm has fold-down sights. They're kind of cheap. They come with the firearm. You fold them down, and then I'll press two levers down to pop them back up. Although cheap, they seem to work very well, and it comes with a sight adjustment tool. I actually like these sights quite a bit. Something I do not like about this firearm is the way the magazine ejects. Now, let me show you what the magazine ejection looks like on the LC carbine. When you have some kind of carbine that has the magazine in the pistol grip like a pistol, it very typically ejects like a pistol. You'll have a button that you push in or a lever that you press down in this case, and the magazine will come out. Pretty common. And it's, for lack of a better word, typical. It works like your typical pistol. So it doesn't require a whole new way of learning things to get it to work. The CMR, The mag release is on the back of the pistol grip right at the bottom, and you'll push this forward and then grab the magazine as it comes out. Now that seems to make a lot of sense. When you go to change mags, just pop that out and take it out. Okay. However, I am not a fan of it working that way. And I'm going to use my pistol to illustrate the point. If I'm shooting my pistol and I want to reload, but there's still rounds in here and I want to retain that magazine, I'm going to pull the mag out of my pouch, put it between my two fingers, take out the outgoing mag while I put in the new mag, and I won't put this back in the mag pouch. I'll just put it in my pocket because putting it in the mag pouch is difficult. And that's called a tactical reload, and you retain that magazine because you don't want to lose it in the field or because it still has rounds in there that you're going to use later. But if I had to do a speed reload, as I'm firing, I'm going to rotate this pistol so I can eject that magazine while I'm reaching for my new magazine and then reload. If I had to do that with the CMR30, I've got a magazine in it, and I've got this magazine in my pocket or whatever that I'm reaching for. Instead of ejecting this mag while I'm reaching for this one, I have to take this mag out before I reach for my new magazine. In my opinion, that's going to slow me down. Now, when you're talking about changing mags on a rifle that has 30-shot magazines, there might not be too many occasions where you really need to reload that quickly, but there might be a few where you do, and it's those where reloading quickly is really going to make the difference. And that extra second or two can make truly the difference. And that's a feature I do not like. Now, features that I do like about this are that this is supremely light. I can feel it weighs a lot less than the the LC carbine. I also like that this firearm is, as compact rifles or carbines go, not only light, but supremely small. I can just about put the thing in my pocket. How often can you, if you need to do some work, just stick that in your belt and then do whatever work you need to do. Not that I would endorse that as particularly a good idea, but you get the point. This rifle, although it has features that I don't like, there can be no mistaking that when it comes to this type of firearm, this is about as small and light as it's going to get. And 30-shot magazines give you a lot of firepower, so it really has some pluses. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is reliability. Traditionally, I have not had good luck with Keltecs. I found that they malfunction a lot. However, this particular one, the first shot I went to fire, chambered around, fired it, and it malfunctioned. And I thought, oh, here we go. That's been just about the only malfunction I've had with it. You have to be careful when loading the magazines and make sure they're loaded correctly. But if you do that, it seems to work just fine. I've not had any malfunctions with it here today. While by contrast, the LC carbine, when I bought it, it came with one 20-shot magazine, and that magazine was defective. It had a bad habit of every time I fired the rifle, that magazine would pop out just a little bit and not chamber the next round. Because I have the Ruger 5.7 pistol, which uses the same magazines. Oh, side note before I forget, Ruger 5.7 pistol uses the same magazines as the LC carbine, and according to every source I see, the Keltec PMR pistol uses the same magazines as the CMR. Okay, to get back on task, when that magazine kept popping out, I was concerned that I had some real problems. No, it was just that magazine didn't work with the rifle. Worked fine in the pistol, not the rifle. But since then, in filming today's presentation with different magazines, I've found that I've encountered magazines that work in the pistol, but a couple of them have that problem of popping out of the rifle. Now, whether or not that's something specifically wrong with my LC carbine or indicative of the entire line, I don't know, but keep that in mind. So in some ways, I found this particular Keltec to function better than this particular Ruger. Surprising, but a real plus. So if I were to say the real bottom line of these firearms, to me, one of the advantages of any kind of PCC is to use the same ammunition and the same magazines as your pistol. I have the Beretta CX4 Storm rifle to match the 92FS. And I have the Ruger 5.7 pistol to match the LC carbine. I don't have a PMR30 to go with the CMR30, and that's primarily because I don't like PMR30s at all. So having this without the pistol to match it, for me, not a great thing. But having this firearm that I seem to be able to shoot relatively well, at least as well as the other one, and having it being so supremely light, this might have a lot of applications. A while ago we did a presentation where I talked about my top 5 briefcase guns. Looking at the size of this might become number 6 on that list. So, hopefully this covered some useful information. And if you've sat through this entire presentation, thank you for your patience. So as always, don't try this at home on what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the Keltec CMR30 as it compares to the Ruger LC carbine video.